Presidential campaign. A week ago today, he was on a number of cable news broadcasts saying he would not fully comply with the grand jury subpoena in the Mueller investigation. Last Friday, Nunberg spent several hours inside the District of Columbia federal courthouse with the grand jury. Sam Nunberg joins me now. Thanks so much for being with us.
It's an honor, Anderson.
I want to get first to I want to get to your grand jury appearance, but
Right.
I just want to ask you about the committee shutting down its investigation along partisan line. You have said that President Trump should agree to be interviewed by the special counsel. Do you think now this will allow him to either not appear before Mueller, or saying essentially, look, this committee has already ruled?
No, because it's two different issues. The committee is investigating. They can do whatever they want in the House. They can do whatever they want in the Senate. But this independent counsel is not going to shut down anytime soon unless they have certain answers that they get from the president.
Do you think the president might use this as a reason to fire Mueller?
The president should not fire Mueller. It would be catastrophic at this point.
You think he should testify in front of Mueller?
Well, not testify. He should meet with Mueller, and they should have. And I don't even think Robert Mueller, frankly, would be the one questioning him, but that's a separate issue. But if they can come to an agreement, I think it would be advantageous for everyone, because that way it could expedite this process.
You, in terms of the grand jury testimony,
Right.
there's obviously a lot of stuff you can't discuss. Can I ask you just,
Sure.
in general, what officials asked you about?
Well, look,
The general topics?
What I can say is I can't talk about I don't even feel comfortable with the topics, Anderson.
Okay.
I can explain this because I would be undermining what the government is presenting to the grand jury.
Right.
I could talk about what was in my voluntary interview, certain topics that were up. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that they're asking me about Roger Stone and Julian Assange.
Right.
I think that's no secret.
Michael Cohen, Steve Bannon?
They've asked me, not in the grand jury, frankly, and I really shouldn't get into this, but they certainly had a lot of questions about my time, because even though I was barely on the campaign, I was with Mr. Trump, then Mr. Trump, now the president, for around 4 years, and I was around even though I was through that summer, I was around New York, and you could hear certain things that have a connection with Roger. So
You said in another interview that they asked you about Michael Cohen, but you didn't answer. Was it because of attorney-client privilege, because you're a lawyer and he's a lawyer?
Right. There are some things that I feel that I can't necessarily answer about things that I've heard around the office if it involves the president and involves Michael, because we're both lawyers, and therefore, it would break privilege. If it involves something in terms of strategy, for instance, this is a question they asked me in a voluntary interview. Did the president ever take a position that he directly told you because of his business interest? And the answer is no. It's absolutely not. Never came up.
Do you believe that Michael Cohen could be in legal trouble with the Mueller probe based on the totality of whether it's the grand jury or your voluntary interview?
Not based on my grand jury or my
on your
voluntary interview at all, but just based on recent developments that we're hearing now with this payment, alleged payment to Stormy Daniels. I hear you know her, and
I've met.
And I think that there's a lot of issues that they could be looking into in terms of, financial things like that. But I don't know anything about it. I only know, once again, what I read. What I would tell you is that Michael is extremely loyal to the president. Michael worked very hard for the president, and I think he has an attorney-client privilege relationship, but we'll find out.
As for Roger Stone, you've been very obviously publicly supportive.
Yes.
You've called him your mentor. Do you think he's a witness in this investigation or a target?
He's certainly, there's a distinction between subject and target.
Right.
In the very least, he's a subject. I think that's pretty obvious. And look, a lot of the times when you ask me what questions did they ask in the grand jury, which I won't talk about, but viewers can understand what they're asking if you watch the hearings, because they're kind of similar to the questions when they ask in committee hearings in the Congress.
The difference between I'm just curious on a personal level, because it's you're one of the few people who've sort of done them both, and it's fascinating.
Sure.
The difference between sitting in front of, for the voluntary interview, and sitting in the grand jury, what's it like? Sure. Just in terms of, the length of time, they have a lot more time during the voluntary thing.
Correct.
Some people have said it's almost like they've got a checklist of stuff they're going through, checking off boxes.
Well, first of all, two things. So first of all, in the grand jury, they only meet, I believe, 2 times a week. So they have to get as much information in front of that grand jury. And I will tell you, to the extent I looked at the grand jury, because I was mostly facing the lawyer who was questioning me, these people are taking notes. They're taking it extremely seriously. Very, very intensive.
Because sometimes I testified in front of a grand jury in a stalker case.
Yes.
There were people reading the newspaper during it. You didn't see that?
Not at all. Notes. They were looking at all the exhibits that were presented. For me, the voluntary interview was harder.
Because they had more time.
Not because they had more time, because you walk in, and I think that this is just what they do all the time, is the first, let's say, 75 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever it is, they go at you rapidly, and they want to test whether or not you're going to be truthful. And they're really, really asking you all these types of questions that, for some of them, were pretty hard for me to recall.
But some of them, but that they probably already knew the answer to.
Exactly. They do know the answer. And at one point they did tell me, because there was one question where they asked me a couple of times, and I said, oh, thank you for asking that again, because now I recall. And they said, Mr. Nunberg, we know these answers. So when, once again, compare that to the grand jury, where whatever they're asking me, they're just trying to get this information, and it's straight facts. And one of the reasons I would say that this was not a witch hunt from my participation was, Anderson, they never asked me in the grand jury, here's what I can say, what is your opinion? What do you think?
They just want facts.
They just want what I know directly.
So you don't believe that this is a witch hunt against the president?
I don't believe it's a witch hunt against the president, because I don't believe Rosenstein had any choice once they used the Rosenstein memo as the rationale to fire Comey, which was fine by me. I think the president could have got away with the Lester Holt interview where he says it had to do with Russia, but then, and he was so ill-served by his staff, he had the Russians in the Oval Office. What was Rosenstein supposed to do?
Why did you, I mean, obviously, every attorney last week was saying, look, you have to appear before the grand jury.
So, right,
you were
so
saying
there
you
were
weren't
two.
going to. Why did you decide to?
So that was something nobody figured out. And I can tell you this, I got 2 subpoenas. I was always going to appear in front of the grand jury. The issue was whether or not I had to go through this arduous, onerous process, which, by the way, was very emotional for me, because it was emotional the way I left the campaign, to have to spend all this time on this. While I have, I have clients, I have things I have to do. So I think that was the issue there. But at the end, I, to the best of my abilities, I fully cooperated.
Are you glad you did?
Yeah, I'm glad I did. I always intended, once again, to show up to the grand jury. I went through and I tried to get all the documents they wanted as quickly as I could. And frankly, by the way, Anderson, it wasn't as onerous as I thought it was.